what I'm doing today is just going to give you a little bit of our story, a little bit of the background, but certainly we've had some successes, so I'll outline some of those. And as I go, I'm going to give you some of the examples about some of the things that we've done. But essentially, I'm going to talk to you about why we did this, what we actually did, our process, how we went about the implementation, and of course originally the case study was written way back in April, so it's now September, so we've done other things. So going to also share a little bit about what else. So in terms of the actual story, I have to really say that there was a whole lot of synchronicities, and the story doesn't start with me, but it starts with another member of what I call our team, who's in the room now. And it was simply that they heard both Alison and Terry Young, and Terry who's not here, at a conference in 2013. And the idea was so great that Marilyn decided that, well, we have to go out and see whether this is something that we can use for clinical studies. And we met with Terry, and the next thing I know, it's January 2014 and Alison is doing training, and it's a faculty-wide initiative. But in 2014, and this is the thing about synchronicities, you really know when things are aligning. PebbleBash was in Victoria. Hello, that's just down the road round the corner. There was also an ePortfolio forum that Terry Young was hosting that was in September. So there were a lot of things that actually came together for us. There were also some challenges, because my original plan was that we were going to roll PebblePad out in our first year intake, and our first years go out in placement in June. Which, January to June, that's a reasonable lead time, that's not too bad. And one of our alumni had a, really great background in IT, so he was going to come on board. And then, of course, everything went pear-shaped, because what I didn't mention is the head of my department is also the Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning, and I needed to start as soon as the first lot of students had gone out. Our Year 4 students were already on placement, so we'd missed those. But in February, my Year 3 students were going out, so that 6-month time frame suddenly became very, very shortened. And what actually happened was our alumni went and got a job, so he wasn't available. So I had this delightful, young, enthusiastic other member who, like me, wasn't really IT au fait, but enthusiasm in buckets, and that's the absolute serendipity, because he just took that challenge on board like you wouldn't believe, and I couldn't have asked for a better colleague than what I actually got. And that led to a whole lot of synergy, and some of that synergy I'm going to share with you. So sometimes things, the way they start off and where they end up, can be very, very different. What's really fortunate for us, that we already had clinical workbooks, we had a very strong structure, and next year it's 20 years since the writing of the curriculum, which was written by the person who said we have to have PebblePad. So it really fitted in with what we were already doing. We had professional development, we already had a reflective philosophy. So, this is what we needed to do to roll it out, to integrate it into all of those areas. And the reason we actually chose it was because it was time. Being medical imaging, and we work with technology, we were a little bit behind, because we weren't quite in the 21st century. We weren't using the online system out in clinical placement. So lots of boxes were ticked by what PebblePad actually offered us. So we didn't even look or consider anything else. We went straight to it. So with our clinical studies, Year 1 to Year 4 was where we began, or really Year 3 is where we began. But for all of them, we had to give them similar things. So we did give them a folio page where they had to introduce themselves. They needed to talk about their practice. They also needed to talk about their professional attributes. And I wrote up my own after looking at what Alison had done and used that as an exemplar until we were able to gather exemplars for them, because that immediately contextualises it, because it's much more interesting to see what other students do than what your academic does. An image collection is something that we also went to because this was an ability now to see the students' work. We already had competency-based assessments, clinical skills assessments, and now we were delivering them online. We used reflective reports and logs, and we've also gone on to having case studies where they can annotate the images and upload them as well. We hadn't done reflections on a weekly basis previously, but they'd always have to have reflective elements. So suddenly we're able to really get them to have an unstructured blog, which hadn't been available before. Previously, we'd used Benner's framework in nursing about critical incidents, and they had to follow a particular way of writing something that they encountered in their first year in the first semester and again in second semester. Nicely in PebblePad is Driscoll's framework of what, so what, now what. So we've now embedded that into our second years. So one of their weekly reflections in second year has to use that Driscoll framework. And it really gives them a bit of an insight. Now, to authenticate their work, we're now also having them upload a lot of assignments and professional development tasks, so they're signing a plagiarism statement with their own digital signature. They had to do that in hard copy, so now they do it online. So we're able to use those features, which is really beneficial for us. What we needed to do, though, is also look at how we had been delivering things and now we're in the online environment. We had to come up with a new liaison model. We used to go out and visit our students or have phone interviews with them. Suddenly, through PebblePad, we were able to do it online in basically an asynchronous way, because they'd fill stuff in, we'd go on, have a look, we'd fill stuff in, and also their tutors filled stuff in. So we came up with this formative feedback model, and we were also able to look at their work, because most of the time when we went out one-to-one, we couldn't see their progress. Yes, we could look that they'd written some things in and ticked some boxes, but it was always in development. It was never complete, and they'd had notes. Suddenly we were able to look and say, hey, this doesn't make sense, you need to change this. So they got formative feedback at a given time, and it was really up to them whether they followed that feedback. But if they followed the feedback, then when we came to do their summative assessment, most of them would be on track. To help us, we actually also used the conversation forum within Atlas, within that feedback model, because we were finding, and not from a technology point of view, but also from a requirement point of view, we would get the same questions, and I wouldn't just get it, but my colleague John would get it. So, you know, many students would be emailing us simultaneously, and we would be maybe sometimes giving slightly conflicting answers or slightly ambiguous answers. So the forum in Atlas is what we've been using this year. So when they email us, great question for the forum, have you asked it in the forum? And 9 times out of 10, before we got to answer it, one of the other students would answer it. So it was really valuable for that, from that peer assisted thing. Sometimes even with the technology, they'd go, hey, try this. And we'd of course, you know, go in and moderate, or go in, yes, you're absolutely right, that's exactly what you need to do, or also consider and appreciate this is how it sits. So that's been a really valuable tool for us, and really great feedback from the student. So how we went about implementing this was in a phased approach, and our phases were really overlapping. So our first phase, because it was like this period of rollout, was a hybrid phase. So we had printed workbooks still, but we also discovered, or basically looked at seriously, what it was that we could give the student to do. So there was a student-led focus, and of course we were available to support them. Phase 2 happened very quickly as well, where we identified what we called some of our champions, and we got our externals on board, not everyone, but a very small select amount of people. And at that time we were still doing face-to-face liaison, so as we went on liaison, we were actually doing one-to-one tuition with the external tutor, so that they actually knew how to use PebblePad and what the students were doing. So that led us into the sustainability phase, because when we got on to our online liaison, we'd already embedded, you know, these sorts of things. So it was sort of overlapping, but certainly we didn't roll this out randomly, even though there wasn't really that much developmental or preparation time. So this is it in a nutshell, what we did in semester 1, and semester 1 after the training in January started in February. So, you know, sometimes you have to look at what is feasible, what can we do, and we just kept building. We just kept building. So by the time we got to my year 1s in June, which was where I intended to begin, we'd already were able to establish a split cohort. From, you know, a research point of view, it's a really good way to be able to follow them, because half of them got the traditional method and half of them got the new method. So it's just the way, again, serendipity worked out. And why was it a split cohort? Because we'd only at that point managed to educate 40, or half of the you know, educators had actually come and done a workshop with us. So we had no choice, they had to get the workbooks. But again, that's, I call it the synchronicity and the serendipity when it lines up. So in chronological order, we were really supporting by semester 2, and this is the way they rolled out and when they went out. So the second years went out, then the third years, then the first years, which enabled us the following year in 2015 to get our fourth years on board. And what was really great was that our fourth years were really the third years who'd done it the year before, so it just rolled and followed on. So basically we were completely online in a very, very short period of time, just by simply following, I'm going to say, some common sense and what was achievable and feasible. So this is a bit of an overview in terms of what we did in a snapshot, because these are all the elements that the students had to do and the year levels. But the things I've got in blue, we actually introduced new elements, because you don't just take something that's on paper and put it straight into the online system, because there's no benefit in that. An online system allows you to do so much more, so why wouldn't you? But we also had to find ways of enabling them to be excited and to be, you know, engaged and involved, and that's just what I want to talk about in a moment. But what we did in all of this right at that very start was identify who our stakeholders were and identify what we really needed to do. So there were lots and lots of background work. We were fortunate that we already had another project that I was involved in, which enabled us to use videos. So, you know, once we'd gone into this, you know, sustainability part, we were then creating videos rather than giving lots of paper and lots of handouts. And those videos are now embedded into our workbook. So they're not just PebblePad help, but they're our PebblePad help, showing them how to use our particular things. So the whole way we were getting feedback and we were evaluating. We always do a debrief as soon as students come back from placement. So every time we were talking about PebblePad, but particularly in the first year, we ran lots and lots and lots of focus groups, not just for the students, but also for the educators to get feedback about how we were going. So this is our first iteration, and this is where it was completely student-led. They had to keep a register, and we, you know, got them to do certain tasks, introducing new tasks, new elements, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So this is attempt 1. This is a slightly different workbook, but this is a year later, where we're now getting lots of links, lots of things embedded so that they can have a look. But this image collection, which was the new task, is now situated here. And this is what it looks like now. And the image collection is still there, but you can see that with each time it's getting a little bit tidier, it's getting a little bit slicker, it's pretty much where we want it to be. What I also want to point out to you, and this is what feedback's so important, we've got some things, and you probably can't make out that you've got an asterisk there, but the very first workshop that we ran, one of our alumni said, "But I don't want to go into all of the students' pages." I said, "You don't need to, it tells you, it says agreement." That's what, no, I want a flag. So, okay, what flag are we going to give them? We put in an asterisk. So everywhere where there's an asterisk, our educators know that's where I need to go, that's what I need to do, that's where I need to look. And again, that's the value of actually asking the end user what's going to benefit you. So really, our success is because we had strategies, but it was also the way we approached it, and we were always looking for the solution. So of course we were going to have challenges, but we weren't looking at it from, you know, oh my God, this isn't working. We were looking at, okay, that didn't quite work. How are we going to improve it? What are we going to do to make it work? So we really approached it with simply solutions in mind, or as we say, a solution mindset. And the support we got from Pebble was absolutely invaluable, because without that feedback from them, we would never have been able to find some of those solutions. So right in the middle is where that synergy and that magic actually happens, because you have to pull all of those elements together. So it's not like there's just a recipe, but it's like making everything work for you. So the image collection was this new task that we gave them to really get that student engagement, because we were very aware the first lot of students had used paper workbooks, so why would they want to do something digitally? The reason they wanted to do it was because we were now asking them to display their work, which was never possible before. First iteration, not very good, didn't really work very well because we didn't know how to do it, so we just got them to upload. And at PebbleBash, I was asked to show this by Deb Holmes, because she'd come out to Monash with I think Tony Lavender and Alison just beforehand to run a workshop, and I'd shown her this, and she goes, "Oh, to show other people what you're doing." Well, at PebbleBash, Terry Young goes, "Ruth, why are you doing it in such a cumbersome way? I don't understand why you don't have a folio page." And I'm going, "Folio page, can I actually put that into a workbook?" Yes. So that's what we did. And that's the thing, again, about that serendipity. You just need someone to potentially guide you. So lo and behold, semester 2, that's what we got, and it changed it completely, made it really easy. And we then started to give them more structure and more, you know, support. So someone was asking me, as mentioned, about PDFs. This is a PDF. And that's what it looks like when you download it. So you lose some of the formatting, but not completely. This is a screenshot of what it actually looks like in the workbook itself. So there is a bit of difference when when you download it. But this certainly was a great success for us. And I'll just quickly, gone backwards. Trying to, don't think I'm going to manage to play the video, just to see what students actually think.
At Monash University studying radiography. I was one of the first students to use PebblePad as part of my clinical placements. I think it's an effective tool and a useful tool to use both before, during and after placements. Before placements, I like to look at it. It's got all the information, all my tasks I need to complete in the one simple location. During placements, I can upload some images of mine, ones I'm proud of, ones I'm not, so I can look back and assess my progress as a radiographer. And I can also upload case reports and edit them as much as I like, and receive some live feedback from my assessors. After placements, I can look back on my work in PebblePad. I can see stuff all the way back from when I first started using it in second year. I think that PebblePad's a tool we should use in the future. It's adaptable, we can change it quickly to suit students in different situations. And most of all, I like it because we're saving a few thousand trees.
So certainly we got lots of ticks also from the students, which was, wonderful. And we, thanks to PebblePad and their encouragement, actually last year entered a couple of awards, and we were successful in one of the awards. And this is my colleague John, who's done a lot of the background work, and really accolades to him that he's been such a great supporter of it. So what else? Well, we are showcasing portfolios next year for the Year 4s, like why do I need to be registered? And we've certainly embedded it into our curriculum. Even though we're saying this was for our clinical studies, we use it in our labs now. So we use it in Year 1 and Year 2. We've got some posters that the Year 2 students actually went and got images. They use it for peer assessment. I've got 2 quick examples that I want to show you. Just going to, this is a Year 2 student, went travelling, didn't have to do this, completely did it off her own back, wanted to share her overseas experience. That's not going to open, and neither will that, but that doesn't matter. Oh, it does. So, she's actually sharing with us and also looking ahead about being future ready in terms of, some of the CPD that she's doing, where she's going and what she's attending. This is a Year 4 student who was one of our people that we got to proofread stuff. He gives us, a bit of a clinical snapshot, but more than that, he talks about the capabilities, because he also went overseas and showing some of his work. And he's already off his own bat doing what we want to do with our Year 4 next year. So he's done it this year just because he wanted to. He wanted to be ahead of the curve. So addressing what our capabilities and our frameworks are. So that to me is really, really exciting when you get students on their own merits wanting to get involved. This is our poster presentations that are now taking the clinical work and putting it into, it's displayed in PebblePad. Obviously it's not prepared in PebblePad, but that's where they now have it. It's a team effort, so there's a number of people that have collaborated. This is another one. So, they're doing wonderful, wonderful things. So really, version 5 will, when we do those showcase portfolios, are just going to be really exciting to us. It's the tip of the iceberg because it's really what the future has. But I just wanted to summarise and simply say the reason it worked for us, because we actually did have a plan, and part of what we were doing was there was this process all the time. We were refining it and doing it and ending up with a product, but we kept changing the product because it's not static, it's fluid, and we've really been able to demonstrate that. So we've really taken great delight in being able to extend it beyond our clinical studies. So thank you. And all the wonderful people who have helped us along the way, which is the PebblePad team.
I've got a question, but more a comment. It's just really refreshing to see that your students have taken that further and gone off their own backs and designed their own portfolios, and it shows that they are more engaged than I think we are. So that's really nice to see.
Well, there's a whole lot more examples, so there was a little bit of cherry picking what I actually showed you, but it's just amazing when they take ownership, but it's actually giving them the ownership in the first place, and you don't underestimate it. We do monitor, so there have been students who, you can't get them to put a photo up in their bio, but they get this comment, if you do not do this by Year 4, you will not pass. And that does encourage them. And it doesn't help that I remember things, because I go, oh, you've made progress.
But I think, Ruth, also, we were able to sadly show one of the students had not actually got the right verification issue. So if you're worried about, you know, how in workbooks is that signature really the signature of the assessor, you can actually pick it up easier. In the
We had a plagiarism issue, and we had a, you know, as they call it, a backup plan, and our backup plan is we do allow students to upload a paper copy of something, and it still has to be signed off by the supervisor that's actually the nominated person, and the supervisor said, hey, what have you uploaded? They didn't take it down. And yeah, there was a absolute plagiarism issue, and that student didn't graduate. So it's only because of the, and because then I went, I wonder how many of these have slipped through previously. And I'd like to think it hasn't happened, but I can't say it hasn't. But this time we can truly say that, you know, much more robust, much better to monitor. Thank you.